My name is Alara Voss, 30 years old. I used to think dinner would fix things if we just sat long enough, chewed slow enough, and smiled at the right places in my father's stories. I know better now. It happened halfway through the meal, right after Dad refilled his glass, and the conversation slid, as it always did, toward Hannah. The candles made everything flattering. Our faces, our lies, the old wood table that had held every celebration and argument we'd ever stacked on it. Mom had cooked for hours. No one was tasting anything. Your sister figured life out, Dad said, tipping his chin toward Hannah like she was a prize he'd won. Self-made, unlike you. He said it like a joke, a smile tucked under the words, to give himself somewhere to hide. I'd heard that tone before, the applause track he cued whenever the spotlight found Hannah. The investor. The visionary, the one with grit and a plan. I didn't argue. I never do. The arguments never changed the verdict. So I leaned back and said, lightly, like we were trading weather, "Then I won't send you any more money. Now it's her problem." The silence hit like a dropped plate. Mom's fork hovered. Dad blinked at his glass, then up at me. "What money? You haven't sent us a single cent." I looked from one to the other. "I've been sending $5,000 a month since last April." Mom put her fork down. She blinked like the words didn't quite fit in her ears. Dad searched my face, waiting for the grin that would make this a prank. "You mean you sent that to Hannah?" Both of them turned to her in the same breath. Hannah froze, one hand near her wine. No words, just the kind of stillness that cracks open a room. I said it again, slower. "I wired it to her because you won't use online banking and told me you don't trust the apps. Every month. She said she'd hand you cash or write checks." Mom spoke first, her voice small. "We never saw any of it, not once." Dad's eyes didn't leave Hannah. Where did it go? She whispered something about business expenses, barely enough air to carry the syllables. I asked, "What kind of business needs 60 grand in under a year with no receipts and no returns?" "I was investing," she said, louder now, as if volume could be proof. Dad's voice turned flat. "Funny. Every month you told us you couldn't spare $50 for groceries." Mom's gaze, I'll never forget it, moved over Hannah like a survey of damage. "Why did you lie to us?" Hannah had no answer. Color rose into her cheeks like a warning flare. She reached for the wine and missed. "You told them you were broke," I said. "You told me they were fine. Meanwhile, you're in designer shoes and a new Lexus." Mom chose that moment to tell the part that made my stomach drop. "We skipped our mortgage in November," she said quietly. "We thought it was okay. We knew you'd never let us sink. Hannah said you were just busy, that you'd help when you could." Dad stood up so slowly it frightened me. The light made him look older by a decade. "You stole from us." Hannah's chair scraped. She didn't argue, didn't apologize. She just stood, walked around the table, and left. No purse, no coat, no anything. The door shut, and the room felt like it had been emptied of air. The three of us stayed there, listening to a house try to hold what it couldn't. I felt stupid, angry, like I'd been part of it without knowing. I never checked anything. I just wired and trusted. Convenience masquerading as kindness. I didn't sleep much. The night stretched out like a hallway with no doors. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Hannah's face, not guilty, not even sorry, just cornered. Morning came brittle and thin. Mom was already in the kitchen, moving through motions like choreography from a life that no longer fit. She didn't talk. Dad didn't come down until after 10, slippers scuffing, the newspaper he never reads under his arm like a prop. No one said Hannah's name. I checked my phone. No text, no missed calls, no Hannah. Her car was still outside. Her phone and purse were gone. She had left the scene, but not the radius. We spent the day triangulating truth from fragments. Mom kept circling the same questions in new clothing. "Did you really send that much? Did you ever see proof? Did you think she'd actually do it?" I had no answers that didn't indict me for negligence. I sent it through Zelle on the first of each month and let the thought go where we all send things we don't want to track. By late afternoon, Dad had had enough of sitting in the ruins. He said he was going to the bank. The door shut behind him like a verdict. When he returned, his voice was clipped down to essentials. The mortgage had fallen behind again. We were a month late. Hannah had told them everything was handled. Night again, 9 o'clock. The door opened like nothing had snapped the day before. Hannah walked in, hair perfect, makeup flawless, a perfume cloud preceding the silence. No apology. "Where did the money go?" Dad asked. "Tied up in a startup," she said. "It's going to be big." What startup? I asked. A friend's company, she answered, eyes sliding off mine. What kind of company? Mom pressed. An app, Hannah said, a tech thing. What does the app do? Mom again, not unkind, but unblinking. I don't know exactly, Hannah said, but it's close. Who's the friend? I asked. A pause, a look away. Matteo. Never heard of him. We asked for details. She bristled, said it was none of our business who she trusted, said she didn't owe us explanations. Then she stormed upstairs. We didn't follow. Sometimes the only boundary that works is the one you draw at the bottom of the stairs. But even before the next day began, I could feel it, the shape of something worse. It wasn't just money anymore. It was who Hannah had become to herself. Thin, stressed, phone always in hand, checking for a future that kept not arriving. At 10 the next morning, the doorbell rang. Mom called for me to get it. I opened the door to a man who looked like he belonged anywhere but on our porch. Early 30s, jeans, hoodie, that easy smile people wear when they've practiced getting past threshold. You must be... He glanced at me, recalibrated. Ilara, I'm Matteo. He said it like we were old friends, like there hadn't been a detonation at dinner. I didn't answer. Behind me, I heard Dad's steps. He stopped when he saw the man. Matteo didn't flinch. I'm here to talk things through, he said. No misunderstandings. The money is part of a long-term strategy, Hannah agreed. Why haven't you paid back a cent? I asked. It isn't time yet, he said, as if time were a gate he alone could open. Show us something, Dad said. Documents, plans, contracts. Matteo pulled a folder from his backpack. 5 pages of buzzwords, a mock-up anyone could build on a free site, diagrams untethered to reality. Dad's laugh was a tired exhale. This is your empire? Matteo's face didn't move. I don't need your approval, he said. Just Hannah's. Right on cue, she appeared at the end of the hallway, drawn by the gravity of his voice. She didn't look at us when she said, Come in. No, Dad answered, not under this roof. Then I'm leaving with him, Hannah said, and that was that. The sentence you don't know you've rehearsed until it falls out whole. Mom reached for her, begged her not to do anything stupid. Hannah hesitated. A millisecond where I saw the child she used to be, and then Matteo's hand brushed her back. She walked out with him. We stood in the doorway and watched them cross the small distance that turns a house into a stranger's. She didn't look back. I grabbed my keys. I'm following, I said. No one stopped me. I kept 2 cars between us, the way you do when you're following someone you're not ready to confront. Matteo drove like a man who believed traffic would part for him. Hannah's head was angled toward him, attention tilted like an offering. Even from a distance, I could see it. The posture of someone who had made a promise to herself and mistaken it for a promise from the world. They turned off the main road and slid into a part of town the glossy startup pitch on his paper would never admit to. The buildings got shorter, the paint thinner, the grass more determined to grow through concrete. He pulled into a lot in front of a sun-faded apartment complex. The sign said Maple Ridge in a font that had given up. I parked at the curb and waited. They went inside without looking back. I breathed, counted to 60. Then I counted again because my hands were shaking and the numbers gave me something to hold. Doors thudded somewhere above. A dog barked once and then remembered its place. The wind pushed a plastic bag against a chain-link fence and left it there to flutter like an obvious metaphor. A few minutes later, a woman came out. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Sweatshirt, hair in a loose knot. A toddler balanced on her hip with one sticky hand patting her shoulder like he was trying to memorize the shape of her. She opened the mailbox cluster, peered in, and swore. Not loud, but with the familiarity of a name she'd said too many times. Matteo's name. I got out of the car, not quickly, not slow enough to be suspicious. Excuse me, I said, because politeness is a boat you can sail into difficult waters. Do you know Matteo? She cut me a look that started as tired and finished as sharp. Why? The toddler dropped his pacifier and started to whimper. She didn't pick it up. She jiggled him with the reflex of 1,000 repetitions. I said, I'm trying to reach him. My sister, the word caught in my mouth. I reset. My sister is with him. Her face changed, not with surprise, but with a recognition so bitter it curdled the air. Another one, she said. Then, after a beat, figures. She shifted the kid to her other hip, freed a hand, and pulled open the mailbox. Empty. She laughed once. He says he's broke, she went on, almost conversational. Says investors move slow. Says things take time. She looked at me. Time's the only thing he never pays. Are you with him? I asked. It felt cruel to make her say it, but cruelty is sometimes just asking for the truth out loud. She stared like she was measuring whether I deserved the answer. He's the father of my child, she said. He crashes here when he needs to. Then he disappears from meetings. She added the air quotes with a flick of her fingers, like she'd rehearsed the gesture and was done pretending it wasn't a performance. I took out my phone and opened Hannah's Instagram. There was a photo, the rooftop party, the skyline, Matteo's jaw at the edge of the frame like the promise of a man, not the reality. I held it up. Her, I said. The laugh she gave me had no humor in it at all. Cute, she said. He never mentioned a girlfriend. He's good at not mentioning things. A car door slammed somewhere behind us. The kid hiccuped, then quieted, the tiny animal sounds of a child who had learned to take cues from adults' silences. He's using her, I said. It tasted like defeat to admit it like that, like I'd already lost the argument with the part of me that wanted Hannah to be smarter than this. He uses everyone, the woman said simply. She tipped her head toward the building. You want a tour of the empire? Go knock. She smiled, tired and unkind. Watch him sell you air. I gave her my number. In case you need, I started, and she waved the sentence away. I always need, she said. But a number won't fix it. Then softer. Still. Thanks. I went back to my car and watched the stairwell. 20 minutes, 30. Someone came out to smoke and flicked ash into the dirt like punctuation. When Matteo finally appeared, it was alone. He moved like a person who believed the corridor loved him back. He checked his phone, typed, slipped it into his pocket, and looked around. His eyes passed over my car without landing. Then he slipped into a different unit. 2 doors, 2 lives, same key. When Hannah came out, she had that dazed, pressed look people get when they want to cry and don't know where to put it. She didn't see me. She didn't see anything. She walked to the edge of the lot, stopped, turned, and went back inside. I texted Marcus at an apartment complex. He's got someone else, a kid. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, came back. Want me to come? No. I need to do this, but keep your phone on, always. It took an hour before I could convince myself to leave. Not because I thought things would improve in the next 5 minutes, but because there's a point at which watching becomes a way of pretending you can control the outcome. Back at my parents' house, I parked behind Dad's car. The house looked the way it always did before everything fell apart. Ordinary. The kind of ordinary that could make you forget what you knew. I went inside. Mom was at the sink, rinsing a mug she'd already cleaned. Dad sat at the table, newspaper folded in half, like he could keep the world smaller if he bent it tight enough. Well, he asked. He's living double, I said. At least double. I told them about the woman, the toddler, the mailbox, the empty, the laugh. I told them about the building, the second door. I heard my own voice from a distance, stripped down to facts because the alternative was drowning in adjectives. Dad didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he stood and took the newspaper to the trash and dropped it in like he was throwing out a habit. We're going after him, he said. Mom flinched like the sentence had edges. Richard, she began. No, he said. Not loud, not cruel, just final. He stole from our daughter. He used our other daughter to do it. He's not a boy with a dream. He's a thief with a script. I sat. I didn't trust my knees. We need proof, I said. More than what I saw and what she said. We'll get it, Dad said. There's a retired attorney down the street. I'll call him. Mom dried the mug and set it on the counter. She looked smaller than she had yesterday and somehow more solid. I'll gather everything, she said. Statements, transfers, screenshots, whatever we have. And Hannah? I asked, because naming her felt like summoning. Dad's jaw tightened. She made a choice. She made a mistake, Mom said quietly. She's still ours. We worked in a silence that had purpose in it for once. I logged into my bank and downloaded every proof of every month I'd sent. I typed a list of dates. I tabbed between screens like I was stitching a wound. Mom pulled a shoebox from the hall closet and went through envelopes with the careful hands of someone who knows paper can be a weapon. Dad called 2 people, then a third, then wrote down a 4th number and circled it twice. By early evening, the daylight had given up. The house welcomed shadows in the corners and kept them there. I texted Hannah twice. No response. I called once. No answer. The ring cut off like she'd picked up and hung up without speaking. At 9, the front door opened. We all looked up, the way animals do when they hear a storm shift directions. Hannah walked in. No bags, no perfume, no mask. She stood in the doorway like the air behind her had pushed her forward and then abandoned her. "I'm hungry," she said, as if that were the most honest thing she could offer. Mom moved first. Of course she did. "Sit," she said, already reaching for a plate. No," Hannah said, and the word surprised her. She swallowed. "I mean, please, but I have to tell you something first." Dad didn't move. He never did when he was reining himself in. I kept my face neutral, because the person across the table from you is more likely to confess to a wall than to a judge. Hannah looked at her hands. Her voice when it came was small and scraped raw. "I love him," she said. "Or I thought I did. And he promised." She stopped, shook her head, and laughed at herself, and it was a terrible sound, brittle as a plate before it breaks. "It doesn't matter what he promised. He has a kid." Mom's hand went to her mouth. Dad's eyes closed. Mine didn't. "He said he was going to fix it," Hannah went on. "He left to pick up dinner, and when I came out of the shower, his clothes were gone. The ring was on the nightstand. His tablet was on the bed." She inhaled. I looked. No one asked what she saw. We waited. "Messages," she whispered. "So many. Women. Screenshots. Transfers. My name. He called me useful. He said I was emotional. He said I was easy to convince." Her chin trembled. She forced it still. "I walked 2 miles to the bus stop. I cried in front of people. I don't do that." Mom reached across the table, then pulled her hand back like she'd touched heat. "We'll fix it," she said, which is what mothers say when the only tools they have are words. Hannah shook her head. "You can't fix this." "We can start," I said. "We need numbers. All of them." She looked at me like she'd expected a slap, and I'd handed her a list. "Relief looks a lot like exhaustion if you don't know how to read it." She nodded. "Okay." She took out her phone, the screen a spiderweb of cracks. She opened her banking app and turned it toward us like a confession. We went line by line, month by month, the way you read a ledger of faith. Rent that wasn't her rent. Cash that wasn't for her. Transfers to fake business names that had the audacity to try to sound legitimate. "How much?" Dad asked finally, and his voice had none of the thunder left in it, only weathered wood. "All in." Hannah swallowed. "Over 80, she said, plus 2 credit cards, and the car lease." Silence gathered. Not dramatic, just dense. Dad stood and walked to the window and didn't look out. "We're going to the police in the morning," he said. Hannah recoiled like the word itself could bruise. "No, please, I can't. People will know. He already did," I said. "He already made you small. The law won't make you smaller." Mom's voice found its steel. "If we don't stand up now, you'll never get your life back." Hannah pressed her palms to her eyes and nodded. A tiny motion, a tectonic shift. "Okay," she said, "okay." Dad nodded once. "Then we begin." He sat back down. Mom slid the plate in front of Hannah. The fork gleamed. The house exhaled. We didn't say grace. We didn't need to. The act of eating together without a lie between us felt holy enough. Later, when the lights were off and the room settled, I stepped into the porch air and called Marcus. The cicadas sang like 1,000 clocks. "Talk to me," he said. "He has a child," I said. He had a script. She believed it. We all did. "Belief isn't a crime," Marcus said. "What he did is." I closed my eyes and let the night push against my face. "Tomorrow we make it official." "Tomorrow," he said, and in that one word there was a kind of promise I did know how to trust. Behind me, the house creaked in the way it always had. Old bones settling, old stories shifting to make room for a new ending. Morning came gray and honest. For the first time in weeks, there were no secrets left to dodge. No pretended smiles, no half-truths spinning in the air like dust. Just the 4 of us in a kitchen that smelled like burned toast and consequence. Dad had already dressed in his work jacket. Mom sat with a stack of envelopes in front of her like they were weapons. Hannah was at the table, pale but steady, hair tied back, eyes ringed from sleeplessness. I poured coffee for everyone, because sometimes peace has to start with something ordinary. "We'll start with this bank," Dad said. Then the lawyer, then the police. Hannah winced at the last word, but didn't argue. That was progress, I guess. She slid her phone across the table. "All my accounts. You can look." I nodded and took it, scrolling through numbers that didn't belong in anyone's life. Withdrawals labeled consulting fees, prototype development, beta testing. All the language of progress, built on air. "Fake business names," I said. He even used capital letters to make them sound official. Mom muttered. He thought he was clever. He was, I said quietly. Just not forever. At the bank, the air conditioning felt too cold, the kind of chill that keeps people polite. We explained, showed transfers, dates, amounts. The teller's professional smile faltered halfway through the story. By the end, she said she'd flag the accounts for investigation. Next stop, the lawyer. A woman in her 40s with calm eyes and the kind of voice that makes chaos take notes. She listened, asked for documents, and said, "We can file a civil claim for fraud and emotional damages, but the police need to start the official process." Hannah whispered, "I can't do court." The lawyer looked at her gently. "You already are doing court. You're just sitting on the right side of the table this time." The police station smelled like paper and fatigue. The detective who met us, Detective Ramos, had the worn patience of someone who's seen every version of heartbreak. We gave him everything: texts, screenshots, statements. He scrolled through the photos, frowning at one image, Matteo's business plan. He tapped the screen. "You realize this logo was taken from a stock website?" Hannah stared. "What?" He turned the monitor toward her, showing identical images on Google. He didn't even design it himself. It was almost funny if it weren't so cruel. When we left the station, Hannah stood outside in the sunlight, blinking like someone who'd just come out of a long, dark tunnel. "I can't believe I didn't see it," she said. "You saw what you needed to," I said. "He just told you what you wanted that vision to mean." She looked at me, eyes filling. "I don't deserve any of this help." "Maybe not," I said, "but you need it. That's enough." That evening, Dad spread papers across the table like maps of a battlefield. Each page was labeled, dated, copied twice. He wasn't saying much, but every motion was precise, deliberate, a man rebuilding order, one file at a time. Mom sat beside Hannah, holding her hand. "We'll get through this," she said. Hannah nodded, whispering, "He said the same thing once." No one replied. Some truths didn't need echoing. 2 days later, the detective called. They'd traced multiple accounts linked to Matteo, one under his name, 3 under aliases, one card opened in Hannah's name, without her consent. "He's not just a liar," Ramos said. "He's a career manipulator. We'll issue a warrant soon." When I hung up, I looked at Hannah. "They're coming for him," I said. She swallowed hard. "I thought that would make me happy." "Justice doesn't always feel like joy," I said. "Sometimes it just feels quieter." She nodded, wiping a tear. "Quiet's fine." The next week crawled by. Every day brought another revelation: forged invoices, fake receipts, fake clients. He'd even used Venmo transfers under made-up business names: Eclipse Labs, Vertex Digital, Nova Systems. All sound, no substance. Mom said it's like he built an entire world on her faith. "Then let's unbuild it," I said. And we did, line by line, transaction by transaction, until the mountain of lies looked small enough to step over. On Thursday night, a knock came at the door. Dad opened it. Detective Ramos stood there, hat in hand. "We got him," he said simply. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then Hannah sank into the nearest chair, hands over her face, sobbing without sound. Mom knelt beside her. "It's over," she whispered. "He can't touch you now." Ramos nodded. "He'll face charges: fraud, identity theft, exploitation. The DA's moving fast." When he left, the house stayed quiet. Outside, thunder rolled far off, one of those distant storms that never quite reaches you but makes you close the windows anyway. I stood at the window and watched the streetlights flicker. Dad came up beside me. "We did what we had to," he said. "Yeah," I said softly. "But why does winning feel like losing?" He didn't answer. Maybe there wasn't one. That night, I found Hannah in her room, sitting cross-legged on the bed, surrounded by torn receipts and crumpled tissues. "I can't stop replaying it," she said. "Every time he smiled, every time I defended him, every lie I helped him tell by staying quiet." "Then stop replaying it," I said gently. "Start rewriting it. You already did the hardest part, walking away." She looked at me, eyes swollen but clear. "You really think I can start over?" "I think you already have," I said. And for the first time in months, I believed it. The next morning, the sun came through the blinds in thin, bright lines, like new beginnings drawn in light. There were still bills to pay, calls to make, forms to sign. But somewhere under all that, something fragile and good was breathing again. The worst was behind us, or so I thought. The trial moved faster than anyone expected. Maybe it was because Matteo had run out of stories, or maybe because the evidence spoke louder than his charm ever could. Either way, justice didn't take its time. It came for him like a tide that doesn't ask permission. When Detective Ramos called to confirm the arraignment, Dad didn't even blink. "We'll be there," he said. Hannah flinched. "Do I have to?" "You're the victim," he replied. "And the witness." She nodded, then whispered, "He used to call me his partner." No one corrected her. The past has its own vocabulary. In court, Matteo looked smaller than he ever had. Gone was the expensive hoodie, the effortless grin. He wore a county-issued jumpsuit that flattened every illusion of control. His eyes scanned the room until they found Hannah, and for the briefest second I saw it, his confidence trying to crawl back to life. She didn't look away. She just whispered, "Don't." When the DA presented the case, it sounded surreal even to me. 8 women, 4 states, 2 shell companies, 3 forged IDs. Over $300,000 stolen. 1 child left behind. Hannah's name was one of the first on the list, but not the last. The DA called her to the stand. I watched her walk up, slow, careful, but steady. The girl who used to tremble if Dad raised his voice now faced down a man who built an empire out of lies. "Ms. Voss," the DA said, "can you tell us in your own words what happened?" She swallowed, glanced at the papers in her hand, then at Matteo. "I believed him," she said. "That's how it started. I believed him when he said it was love, when he said the business just needed time, when he said the money wasn't lost, just waiting to grow." Her voice wavered, but didn't break. "I gave him everything, my savings, my credit, my name. And when he left, I thought maybe I'd been foolish. But after everything I've learned, it wasn't stupidity, it was trust. And he took that from me." The room went still. Even Matteo's attorney lowered his eyes. The DA nodded gently. "Thank you, Ms. Voss." When she stepped down, I caught her eye. For the first time in months, she didn't look ashamed. Matteo tried to defend himself, said it was all misunderstandings, joint ventures, consent. But the receipts, the forged contracts, the Venmo trails, truth lined up like soldiers. When the judge asked if he had anything else to say, he shrugged. "I never forced anyone to send me money," he said. "They wanted to help." The judge leaned forward. "They wanted to help," she repeated, her tone a knife's edge. "And you wanted control. That's not partnership, that's manipulation." She sentenced him to 3 years, with no parole for the first 18 months, plus restitution and fines that would follow him longer than his charm ever did. I didn't cheer. None of us did. Justice, when it's real, doesn't come with applause. It just settles the air and makes it breathable again. After the sentencing, we walked outside into the pale light of afternoon. Mom exhaled first. Dad kept his hands in his pockets like he didn't trust them not to shake. Hannah stood still for a while, then asked quietly, "So that's it?" "That's it," I said. "No," she said, "it's not. It's never really over, is it?" I looked at her. "No, but it gets quieter." She smiled a little at that. Quiet sounds good. Back at home, she started rebuilding. She sold the Lexus, closed every account, started going to church with Mom again, got a small job at a local office doing admin work, minimum wage, maximum humility. Her closet went from high heels and silk to sneakers and simple cotton. Her phone, once glued to her hand, now sat on the counter most days. She apologized, not with words, but with actions. Cooking dinner, doing laundry, helping Dad in the yard. The house felt different, not healed yet, but healing. One evening, while we sat on the porch watching the sky melt into gold, she said, "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," I said. "No, I do," she insisted. "You could have walked away. You had your life in Seattle, your job, Marcus. You didn't have to fix this." I smiled at the horizon. "I didn't come home to fix it. I came home because I couldn't watch you drown and pretend it wasn't my ocean too." She nodded, eyes glassy but calm. "I think I get that now." The day before I flew back, Dad drove me to the airport. The road was quiet, the kind of silence that used to feel like tension but now felt like peace, learning how to breathe. Right before we reached the terminal, he said something I wasn't expecting. "I didn't handle everything right," he said. "I thought spoiling her meant protecting her. Maybe it was just easier than holding her accountable." I looked at him. "We all messed up in our own ways." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, but we fixed it." And somehow he was right. We had. When I got back to Seattle, my apartment felt too clean, too quiet. I stood in the doorway for a long minute before stepping inside. Everything was where I'd left it, but I wasn't. I sat down and opened my phone. A text from Hannah waited. Made it through my first full week at work. Mom says hi. I'm okay. I smiled. That's all I needed to hear. Then another text from Marcus. Dinner tonight? I'll cook. Only if it's edible, I replied. Define edible, he wrote back, and I laughed for the first time in what felt like forever. Later that night, I sat by the window, city lights flickering against the glass. The world felt lighter, even with all it had cost. Sometimes families don't fall apart because of one lie. They crumble under all the ones that go unchallenged. It took a con artist to break ours open. But maybe that's what we needed. Something loud enough to shatter the silence. The months after the trial were strangely gentle. No court dates, no reporters, no phone calls at midnight. Just ordinary life, stitched together with small, careful gestures. Mom started baking again. Dad read his newspaper out loud like he used to. Hannah began humming when she cleaned, off-key, but peaceful. Sometimes I'd call after work just to hear their voices. There was something healing about hearing my father laugh again. Not loud, not booming, but small and real, the kind of laugh that didn't need to prove anything. Hannah was rebuilding herself one routine at a time. Every day she took the bus to her office job, brought her lunch from home, and came back with stories about coworkers, paperwork, and small victories. There were no new purses, no shopping bags, no grand declarations of a fresh start. Just quiet consistency, the language of redemption no one teaches you until you've fallen apart. When I finally flew home for a visit, the house felt different the moment I walked in. Brighter, somehow. Lived in. Human. Mom hugged me tighter than she ever had before. It's good to see you, she said. You too, I replied. Then Hannah appeared from the kitchen, wearing a faded t-shirt, no makeup, her hair pulled back loosely. For the first time in years, she looked like Hannah again. Not the version she'd been trying to sell to the world, but the one who used to sneak into my room at midnight to borrow my clothes. She smiled softly. Hey, stranger. Hey, I said, you look good. She laughed. You mean alive? That too. Dinner that night was simple. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and the kind of laughter that fills a house like music. We didn't talk about Matteo. We didn't need to. After we ate, Dad brought out an old photo album. Do you remember this? He asked, turning a page where two little girls sat on a beach, building castles that would wash away in minutes. Yeah, I said. We fought over who got the big bucket. Hannah smiled faintly. And you let me have it. No, I said, grinning. You took it. She laughed. A real, unguarded laugh that made Mom's eyes glisten. Dad leaned back in his chair, arms folded, and said quietly, we didn't lose everything. And for once, I believed him. Later that night, Hannah and I sat on the porch, a blanket draped across our legs. The street was quiet except for the hum of crickets and the distant rhythm of a late train. I still think about him sometimes, she said softly. Not because I miss him, just because I can't believe I ever trusted someone like that. I didn't interrupt. Some confessions don't need answers. After a while, she added, you know what hurts the most? It wasn't the money. It was how much of myself I gave away, trying to be what he wanted. I looked at her, eyes shimmering in the porch light. You gave that part to the wrong person, that's all. Doesn't mean it's gone. She nodded slowly. You really think I can love again? I think you already do, I said. You're loving your life again. That's the hardest part. She smiled at that, a small, trembling smile that looked like sunrise. When I left the next morning, Hannah walked me to the car. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For not giving up on me, even when I was impossible to save. I placed a hand on her shoulder. You saved yourself, Hannah. I just held the light while you found your way out. She blinked back tears, then hugged me tight. Don't wait so long to visit next time. I won't, I said. Promise. As I drove away, I saw her standing in the rearview mirror, barefoot in the driveway, hair blowing in the morning wind, waving until the road curved and the house disappeared behind me. Back in Seattle, the city greeted me with its usual mix of rain and reflection. Marcus met me at the airport, holding 2 coffees. Welcome home, he said, smiling. It's strange, I told him. I think home's finally bigger than one place. He reached for my hand. That's how you know you've healed. We walked through the terminal together, the air alive with departures and arrivals, the sound of people moving forward. That night, I sat by my window and watched the lights shimmer on the wet streets below. Some stories don't end with fireworks or revenge. Some just fade into the kind of peace you don't recognize until you're living in it. I picked up my phone and opened a message from Hannah. Started saving again. Feels weird to trust numbers, but I think I'm ready. I typed back. You're not just saving money this time, you're saving yourself. She sent a heart emoji. I smiled, then set the phone down, whispering into the quiet, finally. The city lights flickered like candles in the rain, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt whole.